the Marilyn sort of like necrophilia industrial complex has been going on since the day she died. Ana de Armas is Marilyn Monroe, kind of in Blonde.
Well, you said it yourself when we were talking last week about something else. I can't recall what, that this is as much of a biopic of Marilyn Monroe as Elvis was about Elvis Presley.
Basically.
It's just it's an exploration of the idea of her.
I can't face doing another scene with Marilyn Monroe.
And I'm so conflicted about this movie in so many ways because it is so technically fantastic. It is just mesmerizing to watch until you have to turn your eyes away, but it abuses her and it exploits her and it puts her through the ringer all over again, the way so many men did throughout Marilyn Monroe's life, you know? And so I wonder what the point of that is. And I want to talk about that with you. And so Andrew Dominik directed this and wrote it based on the Joyce Carol Oates novel of the same name. And the novel is like fiction. It's like a fictionalized version of Marilyn Monroe. Throughout the film, through most of the film, they refer to her as Norma Jean. And it begins with her childhood in LA in the 30s. We see Julianne Nicholson as her mother, who is clearly mentally ill and hyperverbal and volatile. And we see from the earliest days that she had to learn how to suffer through dangerous situations and like survive and come out the other end of them. And it jumps around time. It jumps around to, you know, the 7-year itch and then like back to her pinup days, and jumps around through various men and black and white and sepia tone and color and various aspect ratios and body mounted camera work. Like it's very muscular in its telling. And for a while, it's kind of thrilling. And Ana de Armas is so good. And she's totally giving it her all. She's so present for every second of it. And as best as anybody can, and so many actresses have played Marilyn Monroe, she has found, like, in a detailed, granular way, the delineation between Norma Jean and Marilyn. And she has these moments where she has to summon Marilyn. And both incarnations of this really complicated woman feel vibrant and real until they don't, because eventually she just becomes a pawn and a victim. And she's naked and crying, like naked and crying, or naked and crying and bloody, all the above. And she's physically a pawn a lot of the time. She's being dragged around and put places. And I don't know what that is about. Is he trying to show the horrific treatment she suffered within the Hollywood machinery as a cautionary tale to make us appreciate what she endured? Because it does to her what it condemns everybody else for doing.
So many people have played Marilyn Monroe. We've seen this life story played out in so many different ways. It's almost to me like an American passion play. And from the Journals of Gene Seberg, Mark Rappaport talks about how, like, part of the reason there's so many versions of the life of Joan of Arc is the spectacle of seeing a woman burned at the stake. And you're impatient to get there, in the same way that when you're watching the life of Christ, you are just, when are you going to get to the crucifixion already? And this feels like a movie along those lines, where it is like, Marilyn was a goddess, but she was also a sacrifice. And we can't seem to get enough of that. And this movie wants to just remind you over and over and over again of the degradations and the physical suffering and the torments and all the things that this woman suffered. After a while, it's sort of like, are we making a point about this? Or are we just reveling in the awfulness of this yet again, because somehow we can't, there's some side of us that has to see this literal icon get destroyed over and over and over again. And I agree with you. Ana de Armas, flawless performance, absolutely passes the test of, like, do you forget you're watching her and you think you're watching Marilyn? Absolutely. Like, she does cross that invisible line and does so brilliantly. You know, is the movie made with a great deal of craft and precision? And is it absolutely the movie that they intended to make and were trying to make? Yes. But
and yet
you know, it is this kind of masochistic experience, and I don't really quite know to what end. I think there are certain aspects of it that are kind of just showy for the sake of showiness, like the whole color black and white thing. there's no, I mean, I don't know. And maybe at some point, I've watched this movie once, someone will come up with some sort of graph that explains when it's in color and when it's in black and white, but it's not to delineate like Norma Jean v. Marilyn.
No.
It's not to delineate off-screen v. off-screen or on-screen v. off-screen or happy versus sad or any of that stuff. It just kind of randomly comes and goes.
I think it's meant to put us on edge, like yet another device to put us on edge. So, also the aspect ratio. There's no reason for why that changes the way it does.
Yeah. So
you know?
I don't know. There were times where I was even like, does Andrew Dominik even like Marilyn Monroe? Does he respect her? Like, and then it's like, and if he does, like, why are we, I don't know. Also, I think by the time you get into like, after the second hour or so, it just starts feeling so repetitive.
It does.
It's like, you have seen these like gynecological horrors before. You have seen the people not taking her intellect seriously. You have seen the crazy mom stuff. Like it gets really kind of cyclical, and it's like I started half tuning out because it was like, we've covered this ground. Where are we going? What are we doing here?
Well, I wonder if the numbing is part of the point, because when they show the famous 7-year itch scene, right, where she's standing over the subway grate and the dress is billowing up all around her, there is such joy and romance that we associate with that moment. But the way that Andrew Dominik shoots it over and over and over again from every angle in slow motion and regular speed, up the skirt and like from above her and from the side and black and white and color, like, is he trying to numb us to the spectacle? Is that the point? But if so, why?
I don't know. I think that that particular shot was more effective when Nicholas Roeg did it in Insignificance. He also restages the 7-year itch scene with DiMaggio angrily watching. And you get both the sort of like cinematic high of that moment and of the, what are they doing to this woman of that moment, and in about a third of the time. So I don't know. I want to ask you as a woman, as a mother, as a blonde,
naturally, of course, this is not chemical.
The talking fetus stuff.
Yep.
Walk me through that.
I don't know what that is about. My guess with that is they're not on Marilyn's side with this at all. Are they trying to reflect yet another example of the guilt and instability that mental illness have given her? I don't know. The thing is, like, the Marilyn sort of like necrophilia industrial complex has been going on since the day she died. I remember an SNL sketch back in the 80s with Mary Gross singing "Downers Are a Girl's Best Friend" and talking about how, like, you know, talk to me, Norman Mailer, tell me all about me. How like there was this whole thing of like, you know, Life magazine and books and movies and TV movies and all these things about her life. Arthur Miller's After the Fall, you know, all of this stuff. Like people can't stop talking about Marilyn Monroe. Somehow she is this like singular object of like secular worship that we constantly come back to. If this movie had addressed that or included that in sort of its parade of horrors, I think that might have been something new and different. But I think it's just sort of like, I kept thinking about like those Cecil B. DeMille Bible movies where he's like, oh, these orgies are so terrible and sinful. Let's watch them for 15 minutes, you know? Like this movie is telling you how terrible it was that these things happened to Marilyn Monroe, and telling you and showing you and showing you and telling you and telling you and showing you. It's like, okay, yes, movie, we got it. Thank you. So I don't know. I'm not mad that this was an unpleasant sit. It's obviously designed to be, but I don't feel it's telling me anything, and I don't feel it's addressing Marilyn, the culture, or anything else in a way that's saying anything new. Frankly, Andrew Dominik did a better job talking about the toxic nature of fame and the press in the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Andrew Ford. I don't know what the point of a lot of this is besides just the spectacle of it all, but then some elements of it are great. So like the Jennifer Johnson costume design, everything from like iconic gowns like the Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend dress to like just the little capri pants and the little turtlenecks that she was so frequently photographed wearing. Like, it's pinpoint perfect. So that is all really good. Bobby Cannavale is good as Joe DiMaggio. Adrien Brody is good as Arthur Miller. There's a whole section though with the guys that she has the threesome with, like
Yes.
and it's
Charles Chaplin Jr.
and Edward G.
Robinson
Jr.
Yeah.
And that is fun and sexy, and like they get her for who she is. It's Xavier, Samuel, and Evan Williams is who plays them, and like they're seductive and they're playful, and she's at her happiest. And I guess the point of that is like, here are people who actually loved her for her.
Yeah.
And that of course could not be, because she was doomed. But for like that section of the movie, it is joy, it is sex, it is playful. Like, I want more of that movie.
I mean, people will see this movie, and I guess they should see this movie because there is a lot that's interesting about it. And I think it's going to prompt some interesting conversations. And if it makes people go back and rewatch Marilyn Monroe movies, I don't know that it will, because frankly, like I said, I don't know that this movie even cares about her that much. I've seen Blonde compared to Eraserhead, and they're not wrong. This is not a movie to be dismissed, but it is also, and it's certainly, it was never intended to be a movie to be enjoyed, but I don't think it's a movie that entirely succeeds either.
It's like Requiem for a Dream depiction of Marilyn Monroe. So yeah, I'm very torn on this. I'm saying 6.
I said 6.5. Yeah, I mean, again, I think the craft is there, the performances are absolutely there, but